Good almost afternoon. How's everyone doing? Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for your patience. For some reason, I feel like I'm at a comedy show because no one wants to sit in this front row. I promise I will not be talking about anyone today. But I want to introduce myself. My name is Harry Colbert Jr. I am the editor-in-chief of North News. North News is an entity of Pillsbury United Communities, and we are the community newspaper of North Minneapolis. We distribute 10,000 copies every month, and as you exit, you can grab one of those copies that are fresh off the press, as today was press day. This is the second installment of the Northside Economic Opportunity Network's Community Conversation Series 2.0, hosted by Warren McClain with guest Tanya Allen, president of the McKnight Foundation, Jennifer Ford Reedy, president of the Bush Foundation, and we hope to have with us R.T. Rybach, president and CEO of the Minneapolis Foundation. Previous conversations shared community perspectives on developing North Minneapolis, the impact of COVID-19 on Northside food businesses, and economic trends and government policies influencing the Northside's future. You can view these conversations online at neon-mn.org. That's neon-mn.org. At this point, I'd like to introduce Warren McClain, our series host and president of Northside Economic Opportunity Network, or NEON. NEON builds the capacity of small businesses and entrepreneurs in North Minneapolis to grow community vitality and economic prosperity. He leads NEON in delivering the resources, know-how, and business expertise to minority-led and locally owned businesses, helping them to develop, launch, and flourish. With that said, please allow me to introduce President Warren McClain.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Harry, for that introduction. And thank you, Harry, for moderating this panel once again. Thank you to our sponsors who make the Community Conversation Series 2.0 possible. They include Twin Cities Business, Best Buy, API Group, JP Morgan Chase & Company, Key Investment, the Minneapolis Foundation, Wells Fargo, United Healthcare, Mortenson, Northside Funders Group, Thrivent, Capella University, Ackerberg, and Callis Community Partners, JADT Group, Land O'Lakes, Midwest One Bank, XL Energy, J. Murphy and Associates, Sunrise Banks, US Bank, and Northeast Bank. So let's thank all of our sponsors. Let's give them a hand.
Throughout the 20th century, Minneapolis's North Side was subject to discriminatory policies driven by public and private institutions and resulting in systematic disinvestment for decades. Redlining, racial covenants, enshrined racism and segregation in lower real estate values, and underdevelopment on North Side or North Minneapolis, an area that was labeled Negro, and to be more specific, it was labeled Negro slum on official city maps starting in the 1920s. These policies laid the foundation for some of the worst racial disparities in health, wealth, and quality of life measures in the country that we have today. At the same time, the North Side in 2021 is home to tremendous potential with vibrant entrepreneurial communities working to close the gaps, creating a thriving Twin Cities destination. Community conversations explore the vision, challenges, and collaboration, and exciting work ahead, building a revitalized North Minneapolis powered by homegrown businesses, organizations, and community leaders. At this point, I'd like to introduce our guest. Tanya Allen is the president of the McKnight Foundation, a 25-year veteran of community-led, place-based philanthropy. As a bridge builder and civic diplomat, she convenes people across diverse sectors to catalyze fresh thinking, test new approaches, and advocate for equitable policies and practices to benefit everyone. Please join me in welcoming President Tanya Allen. Jennifer Ford Reedy has served as president of the Bush Foundation since September of 2012. She is active in several civic groups and committees and enthusiastically serves as an election judge. She also teaches as a graduate course in philanthropic history and strategy at the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Public Affairs. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer Ford Reedy. As I said, we hope to be joined by R.T. Rybach, and many of you know that R.T. Rybach has led the Minneapolis Foundation as the president and CEO for the past 5 years. He's a Minneapolis native and has spent 30 years in journalism, publishing, marketing, online media, and many of you also know he served as our city's mayor from 2002 to 2013, and he's focused his career on developing equitable career paths for youth of color. We hope to be joined shortly. Now, in previous conversations, we have discussed the impact of COVID-19 and civil unrest on small businesses in North Minneapolis and the implications on economic trends and government policies for the North Side's future, and cross-sector collaborations driving development. Today, we've invited these leaders of Minneapolis and Minnesota philanthropic community to delve into the intersection of philanthropy, economic opportunity, and racial and social justice. So what I'd like to do now is start it off with some questions for our esteemed panel, and we'll start off with President Jennifer Ford Reedy. As a part of the Bush Foundation's evolution towards a diversified portfolio of funding mechanisms, you and your team have highlighted impacting investments, including grants and program-related investments, or what are called PRIs, as a blended capital approach to advance your region's objectives around equity, social justice, and economic vitality. In your estimation, is this approach working?
It's early still for us, but I'm excited about it. I'd say it's promising. So when we talk about blended investments, we mean having a mix of ways that we are financially supporting organizations and initiatives. And over the last several years, we've experimented with a number of different approaches. So we've certainly done a lot of loans with different structure and different form. We've also done equity PRIs, we've done loan guarantees, we've done lease guarantees. We did something recently where we just actually put money in escrow, kind of a revocable loan to help an organization. So we've been experimenting with different sort of non-typical grant investments. And now at this point, our Community Innovation Grant Program, which is our biggest grant program, it's more than half of our grant money, is now open to any sort of request. So it's how much do you need and in what form? And we'll consider supporting work through whatever mechanism people feel is most needed, or a mix of those mechanisms. So just to give an example, this week, actually, Monday in the Star Tribune, there was an article in the business section about some rebuilding on Lake Street. And it was using assets from the Community Asset Transition Fund, which is a fund that was created to help community organizations secure site control of property to then be able to buy that property and figure out a community-driven approach to deciding what development should look like within that community. So in that case, we've supported that fund with a $2.5 million PRI. And at first, we really thought, oh, this is mostly going to be a PRI. But then we're looking and understanding all the technical assistance and capacity building and things that need to happen at the same time. So we contributed 2.5 in PRI, 2.5 in grant funding. And then as we talked to the community organizations who would be potentially using this money, we found like, hey, that money's great, but this is all of our capacity needs to be able to take advantage of that money. So then we complemented it with another $3 million to be re-granted to the community institutions to have the capacity to really take advantage of that PRI funding. So that's just an example of where we are right now, and really trying to, I think, continuously understand what mix of funding in what form to whom actually serves the work best.
President Allen, have you had experience with this type of funding, and if so, how has that experience accomplished its goals?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. And I wanted first just say how much I appreciate Jen. We've been friends before I moved to Minnesota. So one of my one of the things I feel really appreciative of is that I get to work with her in more strategic ways and to get into good trouble together. And so I'm really pleased to say that at McKnight, we too are invested in the Community Asset Fund as well. But I think what Jen is really talking about is how do we start to layer and scaffold our assets and our different kinds of capital at foundations to actually get to better solution making. Like, that's really what we need to do. And I think what I have had experience with is that foundations have been too risk avoidant in general. So we will look at the assets we have and we'll be more conservative with them in how we will deploy them. It's a lot easier to make a small grant where you feel like you've de-risked your portfolio or you've de-risked your capital, when in actuality what you're doing is you're making it more risky because you're actually underfunding the project, right? Or that you're not thinking about what is it, you're not in partnership with the organization, so you don't really know what Jen is talking about, understanding that organizations can't even take advantage of that solution because they don't have capital. So I would just lift up, because I think that's part of what we're talking about, is how do foundations actually move and act and behave differently in order to create the solution making. And so at the McKnight Foundation, we do have what we call mission-related investments. So that for us is, we give 5% away in our grant making, but that's just 5%, small amount. We got 95% of our capital, our corpus, that if we're not using that, then we're undermining our mission. I often say that if our corpus isn't aligned with our values and isn't aligned with our mission, we're undermining our grant dollars every day before we even walk into the office. And so part of what we're attempting to do, and have done a really good job at it way before I came to McKnight Foundation, is to invest some of that capital into programs and into strategies that actually are focused on creating clean energy solutions, that are funding the development of affordable housing to developers who are doing that, so that we're complementing the work that we're doing on the nonprofit side with the for-profit side. And I think we have to do more of that as foundations if we really want to create durable change. Like, what we've been doing is renting change, and this is no longer, I think, acceptable, particularly when we sit in our hometown. It's mine now, so I get to claim it. But if we're going to sit in our hometown where the world thinks of us as a place of tragedy, it is our responsibility in this particular moment to step up and say, no, we are not going to be about tragedy and trauma. This is a moment for us to be about transformation, right? And that's what I want us to lean into as a philanthropic community. Hi, RT. Welcome. We're happy to see you.
Yes, and welcome President R.T. Rybach. President McLean, what do you feel about that approach, and how do you think it's worked to accomplish its goals?
Well, first I want to compliment and introduce our panel in a different way. First of all, with McKnight, I want to just say that McKnight was critical to NEON's founding. So in the early days, Sarah Hernandez worked closely with us and said, I'm going to make sure you guys survive. So I want to thank you for that kind of support. And I just want to also applaud President Tanya Allen, because she just approved our first 7-figure grant. And then with Bush Foundation, also at another critical juncture, as Jennifer Ford-Reedy mentioned, that they have the Community Innovation Fund, but it also provided resources at a critical time in NEON's existence. And so that was a tool that we used again to make sure that we were sustainable. And also last year we got our first impact grant. So as they move into this space, that's been impactful for us. And so we've been able to use that tool. And then with our RT and Minneapolis Foundation, they've also been instrumental. I spoke to both Grover Jones and Marcus Owens yesterday to find out exactly how folks had supported us. And Minneapolis Foundation has been a great partner, particularly in the Twin Cities Business Rebuild Fund last year, where we were able to disperse a lot of grants to the community. And then RT, I know that as mayor, I needed to share this with you, that Grover Jones had talked about when you made your sort of neighborhood visits, that you made his mother-in-law the last stop, Mama Cookie. So he talked about that. So I thought you'd like that.
I'd stop at Cookies every day, or every year on National Night Out. She's an amazing woman.
Yeah, so now with respect to your question, well, I think PRI is a critical tool that we need to have in our quiver. I think it's a tool that does round out the sort of resources that are needed by organizations like NEON. For instance, we were seated with $1 million grant, PRI from J. and Rose Phillips Foundation that actually helped us launch a fund for African-American developers focused in North Minneapolis. And that was a great tool. We're expanding the use of that, but that's the kind of tool that will help us do, just basically change the trajectory of what's happening in North Minneapolis and in the Twin Cities. So I think it's a great tool. Appreciate the flexibility that people are using and that these organizations are using and putting together for us in the community. So I appreciate that. So it's been a great tool, yeah.
I'd like to ask my next question of President Tanya Allen. Philanthropic institutions like the McNaught Foundation are increasingly looking to play a deeper role in supporting community change makers beyond solely financial backing. In a recent conversation hosted by the Minnesota Council of Foundations, you encouraged nonprofit organizations to engage the full range of their funders' capital, financial, institutional, intellectual, and partnership. What does this more comprehensive funder-grantee relationship look like in the context of rebuilding Minneapolis for durable equity?
Great, thank you for the question. I would say the first thing is that the premise of that quote was simply that as foundations, we have to be in relationship with our partners. And being in relationship means that we have to have trust. And I define trust as, it's not my definition, but I like to use it, is proximity, plus reliability, plus competency. And that's over your own self-interest. So what that means for me, and for us at the McKnight Foundation, it means that we need to be reliable. You should be able to we should have some predictability in the way that we show up in community. The second thing it means is that we have to show up with some proximity. Like, we need to be in community, hearing, understanding, working in conjunction with community leaders. And then the last thing is that we ought to bring our competence, right? And so foundations have lots of different kinds of competences, and I talk about them as capital, right? Like, we have the ability to do grant making, we have the ability to do PRIs or mission-related investments, as we just talked about with Jen. We have the ability, we're in this really privileged position where all of you good people are doing amazing work. You come and tell us what you're doing. We get to glean knowledge, information from you. And then there are lots of people who are kind of thought leaders, who are producing research and who are thinking about big topics, and they want to influence us too. So they come and tell us. So we become this kind of repository of knowledge and wisdom. It doesn't mean that we have knowledge or wisdom. It just means that we are a repository of it. So how are we making sure that we take that privileged role and make sure that that's reflected and that people in community can begin to connect the dots in a lot of those places and those things. And so I really believe that that's part of like how you show up differently. So that's a privilege. Right? And then I think we have to release some of the other kinds of privileges we have. So this is probably a bit controversial, so I'll just say that, because I think that it is the height of privilege when you get to say, this is my role. I don't do that. I don't do that. I just do this. It's privilege. And philanthropy is the main one to say, like, hey, we don't do that. That's not our role. That's not our function. We only do X, Y, and Z. And so for me, if you're trying to be a part of community, if you're trying to be a part of solutions, and we expect that of all of our partners to do things that stretch them and push them to be more present, more strategic, more impactful, then why aren't we holding that same pressure towards ourselves? That's because we don't have any natural competitors, or, there's nobody, we have no prey, right? Like they're not, so we have to make sure that we are pushing ourselves to be more strategic and to show up. And that means that we also have to honor and respect the fact that we have not always showed up smartly in these spaces and have always done the right thing, even though we had intention. And there's a difference between intention and impact. And so I like to make sure that we're really clear about that, and to also acknowledge that we probably are going to make mistakes today too. But as we're doing that, part of that is really about understanding, like, not only are we building trust, but we have to honor the role of distrust, that people distrust us because they actually know history. They're not distrusting us because they are silly or that they are unsophisticated. They're distrusting us because they know how we've shown up in the world, and it hasn't always been the right way. So if you honor that, there is wisdom that we are learning from it that actually should move us and pivot us to act and behave differently. And so that is what I mean when I think about, like, how do we show up as change makers versus just grant makers at an institution like McKnight, and how do we push ourselves out of these roles that we've defined for ourselves around what success is when the impact we want to have is not being achieved. I cannot be successful if my impact isn't being accomplished. And I want us to lift up that accountability. And it's a mutual accountability. We owe that to the community, and not about whether or not the community is doing it for us. We owe that to you all, because this is our hometown, and the resources that are in our corpus are public dollars held in private trust. So we owe that to be accountable.
I'm so glad that this is being recorded at neon-mn.org so that we can go back and listen to that.
That's right.
President R.T. Rybach, how do you believe community organizations' financial, institutional, intellectual, and partnership capital can be used most effectively?
Well, let me put a big fat exclamation mark after everything Tanya just said. And I think, having been in conversations with Jen, I think all three of us feel really strongly about that. And about 3+ years ago, when Shonda Smith-Baker just came over to lead all of our impact at the Minneapolis Foundation, the very first thing we agreed on is she had an enormous amount of community experience. I've been the mayor of the city for 12 years, but we cannot sit in the IDS Center and tell the community we have these bright ideas that they should follow. What we really needed to do was to unpack the power and privilege of an organization and put it in the hands of those closer to the ground. And that's been delivered in many different ways. When the J. and Rose Phillips Foundation joined us, the very first thing that they brought to us, that we brought to the board, was that idea to get those dollars out to NEON. when we just were involved with getting $20 million from the state to rebuild West Broadway and Lake Street, the number one criteria that we said we wanted to have is the criteria would be set by community. So what we need to do is we'll facilitate getting that $20 million out, but Warren's at the table helping to lead where the guidelines are and the community are. And they set that, and then we'll help apply that. You know, I think one of the things that's important about this is we can deliver these things as if philanthropy just came to this conclusion and we're helping to create something new. But what I think we really have to recognize is why do disparities exist? It's because barriers have been put up. And my very first memories are of my family's drugstore at 26th and 4th. You may Google that. You can't get there anymore because it's where 35W is right now. My white dad was dependent on Dr. Brown and Dr. Johnson, the two black doctors in town, to bring their prescriptions to our family drugstore, and white families and black families were economically interdependent. The freeway tore that out, as it did in Rondo, and said, we are trying to recreate what should be the natural order with one major exception. In that period of time, we also accepted the fact that there were codes that prevented people from living places. There were all sorts of financial criteria that kept the natural order, which is the fact that the communities we are now trying to step in and really deliver that privilege to had that capacity, and it was taken away. We're now delivering it back. It's not like it's a gift. It's about restoring what equity should really be about.
President Ford, Reedy, your perspective?
Oh, there's so much in those two answers to think about commenting on. I mean, there are ways in which Bush Foundation is a little different in that our geography is Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and the 23 Native nations that share that geography. So we can't know really what's going on in all the communities that we serve. And I think accepting that and organizing around that and saying, if we can't possibly know, then how do we make decisions that are based on trusting the understanding and wisdom and assessments of the people who do know, which is the people who do live in those communities, and thinking about what that means for our processes and how to be equitably accessible and how to make sure we are listening well enough and in conversations with people directly affected by whatever that issue is or whatever an idea is, to be able to make, we hope, good decisions that are really actually building on community momentum and building community capacity toward whatever that solution is. I think going back to the original framing of the question and the different ways that you can engage with foundations, I think I see a particular opportunity around communications because I feel like it's true for North Minneapolis, but I think it's certainly true for the tribes that we work with, where so much of the media coverage is about the problems in a community, the challenges in the community, what's wrong in a community. And I think there's some part of doing that saying, we want the attention, want the investment, want people to understand. But at the same time, that's really can have a really dangerous effect on how people view a community, and it just to be not true in terms of really having a sense of what the assets are in the community, what the strengths are in a community. And I think that, as Tanya's talking about us as repository of knowledge, one of the things we know, and I get to see every day, is amazing stuff happening in North Minneapolis and in other communities. And I think our ability as funders sometimes to toot the horns of other organizations and communities and things that are happening, I think is a big opportunity for us to really say, you should be investing more in North Minneapolis. And that's not because of the need, that's because of the opportunity. Yes. And that opportunity is because you have people with vision and you have people who are ready to work to make that vision a reality, and that's what you invest in.
President Rybak, in mid-October, the Minneapolis Foundation received $20.8 million in funding from the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development's Main Street Economic Revitalization Program. It's the lion's share of an $80 million statewide program. with an additional $30 million in funds from LISC, Twin Cities, and Propel nonprofits, and $8.5 million raised by your by your Restore, Rebuild, Reimagine Fund. You have nearly $60 million to distribute via grants and loans businesses impacted by COVID-19 and the unrest following the murder of George Floyd, including businesses along West Broadway and North Minneapolis. What's your plan for this funding?
Sure. First up, I was trying to do the math on it. I don't
So
get
was
that 60 million piece, but let me tell you what I know and what I don't. If there's a pleasant surprise
Hold
there,
out
that would be
on us,
really
Archie.
good.
You're holding out.
But you know, let's pull back from why we're in this position. When this summer there was a drought, there was rightfully a call from across the state to help farmers with drought relief. When there is a flood in any part of this state, we rightfully all step up because we are one state. When large parts of Minneapolis and St. Paul burned because of a murder that took place with somebody who had the badge representing the people of this community, when that murder took place and that destruction took place, there should have been the same response. The state legislature looked at that and blinked. People from around the state said, no, we don't want to be part of that. That was a really pretty galling situation. The compromise, which we were happy enough with because it delivered help, definitely, was to create a fund that we had to compete for, half urban, half rural, and we did that. But the problem was about 2 weeks before the deadline, there would have been about 5 or 6 different proposals coming from Minneapolis. None of us probably would have gotten that money. So what we did really was formalize the sort of coalitions that are taking place. The Minneapolis Foundation, LISC, and Propel stood up as organizations that have the capacity to get that money, but we said if we apply for that, we're not going to decide where it goes. The criteria will go back out to the community. So that's what I was referring to earlier. Because that coalition was built, we then were able to get those dollars. That 20 million will go out. It is built on top of the 10 million we've raised privately, led by the Mortensen Foundation and Delta Dental, that is also putting money in. That money is going into already, about 4 million of it is already out on the street, and it's to restore and rebuild these businesses that were damaged. We had a big meeting, Tanya was part of it, I think, when was that? It all runs together, earlier this week. And trying to go out and get more dollars to put into that. So now these two things will happen. There'll be this community process around the 20 million. There is the 10 million going out. All of that will be put through people at the community level. But the damage assessment along those 3 corridors, West Broadway, 38th Street, Midway in St. Paul, and I should add 38th Street, it's about 10 times that. The total amount of uninsured damage is $200 million. So we're going to be in this for a while. Now, how do I feel about that? I feel like we're beginning to deliver back what is needed. I'm really, however, really energized by the fact that we are starting to find, to the degree in this messy way you have to make decisions with people with lots of different opinions, we're getting a really clear focus of where it will go. So that's underway right now. Some of the dollars are going on already. Finally, we call it the Restore, Rebuild, Reimagine because this has really got to take place in 3 ways. Immediately after the destruction, restoring meant to simply get businesses back open, put the boards up or down, put in new windows, security. The rebuild phase we're in now, but we're really excited about the reimagine, because the idea shouldn't be just put Lake Street, 38th, West Broadway, Midway back together. That's good, but nowhere nearly good enough. So now we really want to start thinking, what does reimagine mean? And that's, I think, really exciting.
That kind of leads me into my next question, because when you're talking about this big scale of building or giving, it's kind of been seen from the community standpoint as a funnel. There's this big trough up top, but by the time it gets to the ground level, it trickles out. So my next question is, what are some of the under-the-ground changes that you expect to see in North Minneapolis in the next 3 years as a result of this funding?
You coming back to me again?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first off, one of the things that's been great, and Warren and I are partners on this, on the 927 building, when the Phillips Foundation became a partner with the Minneapolis Foundation, I wound up doing a lot of the on-the-ground work for the 927 building, which is a building that had sat vacant, and people said, what are we going to do with that? Well, the Phillips Foundation stepped up. They partnered with Tri Construction, and we're leasing that building and making great progress, and that is going to eventually be turned over to Tri Construction to own. So it will be 100% owned by Black-owned businesses and nonprofits running right in that area. That's one example of many different things happening down. 1200 building, Kenny McKnight's doing really exciting work about what's going to be about healthcare and wellness. And I'm really hopeful about all of that because, you know, for so long, people have been encouraged to go to West Broadway in spite of West Broadway. What I look forward to now is we're beginning to have people go to West Broadway because of West Broadway, because it represents the community more. We're only scratching the surface on that. That should be a street that celebrates the cultures that are around that street. When I go by Juxtaposition and the incredible work they're doing, I get a flavor of what can be done much larger. When we look at what's happening with North High and North Commons, and then you see the YMCA, you can see things happening. When you look at the Capri Theater, I mean, this is really potentially a great moment in this town, but only if we continue to drive those dollars out to the people on the ground making those decisions.
President Ford-Reed, the same question is for you. What do you see in the next 3 years in terms of tangible results from the giving?
Well, I can't speak to the details of the plan for the fund. I will say, first of all, want to express appreciation to Minneapolis Foundation for figuring out really a way to get that public funding out into community-based decision-making, because we have this giant opportunity right now, like historic opportunity with the amount of federal money that's coming into our region. It's amazing. And it comes with a lot of constraints, it comes with a lot of reporting requirements, it comes with a lot of things that make it difficult to think about, first of all, who can even absorb it? Like, can you, if you're a small organization, even take on the reporting requirements that's involved with federal money? But then also, how do you spend it if it has, you know, a timetable on it, a framework on it, when you really want something that's going to be lasting change? So I think that's one of our big opportunities and challenges of the moment right now is how can we be transformed by this public money coming in? And I think, as I understand, when I've heard you talk about it before, RT, a big part of the motivation for you in receiving this money was actually to relieve some of the reporting burden from other organizations, to say, like, Minneapolis is an organization, Minneapolis Foundation is a big enough organization that they can absorb some of that and then still try and figure out, then how do you get the money actually out in a way that's equitable and where change will happen that's informed by community. So I feel very hopeful about that work, in part because I know the spirit and heart that Minneapolis Foundation and the partners are going into that work with.
And President Allen, how do you see the McKnight Foundation funds impacting North Minneapolis directly?
Yeah, so it's hard to say like what I think the vision is for the next 3 years, because I haven't been here long enough to say that, right? Like, and I haven't heard what the community has said, like what the vision should be. But I guess what I would say is, like, I really appreciate the work that RT and the Minneapolis Foundation are doing, and it's rebuild, restore, rebuild, reimagine. And the reason I wanted to say that is because I want to talk a little bit about the reimagining part. And I think what I would say, and the kinds of things that we're interested in, is how do we create opportunities for community members to come together and to really reimagine. And reimagining, to me, is not like, I want to own that building right there. You may want to own that building, but we might want to take that building down and rebuild another building that uses clean energy, that brings the best of technology, because the people in North Minneapolis deserve the best of technology. Or it may mean that we're talking about Neon's work, which is around entrepreneurship, that what we need in North Minneapolis is, of course, we want a thriving nonprofit sector, but just as important, we want industry. Like, we want ownership. We want to see people own property, own businesses that actually drive and create economic activity in their communities. And so I got one from you, Warren. Warren liked that one. But the point I'm making here is, so reimagining to me is not just like, do we do business ownership? Like, what's our big, audacious goal as a community? Does it mean that we are going to say, like, on these 3 corridors where we've had the greatest damage as a result of the racial reckoning, that we want to have per population, we want to have the most intense and populous amount of BIPOC-owned businesses? Like, that should be what, like, I don't know. I'm just making it up, right? You can figure that out. But the point I'm making is like, it has to be inspiring. It has to drive us to get to something different. Like Moms Mabley said, like, if you keep doing the same thing, you just gonna keep getting the same thing. Right. And so we have to shift out of this mode. And that's the kind of thing that I would like for the McKnight Foundation to be able to support, this notion of wealth creation. For communities and wealth creation for families, and making sure that housing is available in those communities as well, that people can afford. That's also going to grow industry because you have people who are going to patronize industry.
One of the most important things that I heard there was when you said you haven't had a chance to hear from community, which lets me know that that's your primary focus. You want to let community know that they have skin in the game. It's their voice that's being listened to. And I think far too long, members of the community have felt that the philanthropic institution just basically came at it at a more, oh, we know what's best for you here, we'll do this, and the community voice was left out. So we appreciate the fact that community is at the forefront and at the center of what you're doing. This next question is for President McClain. Which other foundations or institutions do you want to see or have more of an impact in North Minneapolis, short-term and long-term? And what is impact and how will it be measured?
Well, before I do that, I want to read 2 quotes. One comes from Senator Smith. It says, with the murder of George Floyd, Minneapolis became the epicenter of a global reckoning around racial justice and police brutality. And then the second quote is from Martin Luther King, Jr. in his I Have a Dream speech. He said, 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. I want to repeat that. 100 years later, the Negro lives in a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. I think no other community is an example of that than the Twin Cities. This is a materially rich community. And so, in terms of organizations that should be, and the other thing is that the term global reckoning of racial justice and racial inequity is powerful, and that's a blot, I think, on our community. But I also think we're at an inflection point. We have an opportunity with these great leaders here to change this environment. We have an opportunity for transformation. And when I talk about the other institutions, I like institutions from around the nation, Ford Foundation, for instance, and other major foundations. I would like all the banking institutions, all the corporations. This is a global, this is a national effort, should be focused on here, because this has been the epicenter, so we need to change that. We have an opportunity to be an example for a model of excellence and transformation. And I heard that term used a couple of times, and that's what we have an opportunity to do, to transform the North Minneapolis and the entire Minneapolis community into a place that we can look at as having responded to a racial reckoning. And I think this is a great opportunity for us, and I'm looking for a transformation. So in terms of measuring impact, it would be wealth creation. I want to see us have the jobs, actually own the opportunities. For instance, if someone's building, and like there are 2 major projects coming on stream in North Minneapolis. There's the light rail that's coming through North Minneapolis that's going to be a multi-billion-dollar project. And in addition to that, there's the Upper Harbor Terminal that's coming in North Minneapolis. Those are tremendous opportunities that we should make sure that the BIPOC community is owning those opportunities. And that we're not just working there, but we need to own the jobs, own the opportunities. We need to get the contracts. We need to make sure that, and then we need to move the needle in terms of wealth, so that we're owning the properties, that housing is, that people are able to own houses. Two of our clients that went through the pandemic in the last year or so, that they had to pivot, but those two clients now have just bought a house, both of those clients. So they went from being struggling to now buying a house. And these are micro businesses. So that's the opportunity that we have. We have the opportunity to build wealth in that sense. And they didn't buy affordable housing property, they bought houses. And that's what we want to be able to do. We want to be able to buy houses, we want to be able to build wealth. And this is the opportunity. That's the measure of success, that we can change the needle. There's 19% black ownership of homes in North Minneapolis, not North Minneapolis, in Minneapolis, versus 58% for the white community, and it's the lowest percentage of all the groups. And we've been here the longest. And so that is something that needs to change. And so I want to see the needle moved in those areas. I want to see wealth built in those areas.
Absolutely. Well said. This is an open-ended question, so feel free to jump in. But my question is, what is your pledge to community? What's your specific pledge from your organization to the community of North Minneapolis?
Well, I guess I'll start. I would go back to the point about dismantling barriers that have prevented exactly what Warren was talking about from occurring. I also think there's, when we were sitting down to do our framework, I mentioned Shonda earlier. Shonda and I had this conversation about hope. And we wanted to build hope into the way we look at it. And our team looked at it and they thought, well, that's kind of a strange thing to do these days. That seems delusional. That seems like we're not acknowledging the pain out there. But both she and I, when we thought about it, we felt, no, we want to keep that in there. Hope is essential. That is not blind hope. That's the idea that you need to really look at the moment we're in. Because, man, you can wake up these days and this seems like a really tough period of time. It is. But you know what? We are turning over the rock. We're turning over the rock of racism. We're doing that with gender. We're doing that with a whole lot of things right now. I'm not very hopeful about a period in time in which you accept a status quo. I am hopeful about a time where we're doing the very messy work of actually recognizing what was wrong, what are those barriers. And so I believe our commitment is to do everything. I was just talking about the tactics, but it's to create a hopeful future that is about the reality of turning over the rock and finally doing something about it.
I want to pick up on what RT said. I'm sorry, Tanya. Is dismantling the barriers, I think, is critical. And I think that doesn't come up often enough in discussions because a lot of our businesses can't get access to contracts because there are rules, there are codes, there are ways of doing business that prevent them from getting access to those opportunities. And that prevents us from scaling. So I'll just add that.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, so you all have me thinking, like, one of the things I've been struggling with since the protests and the conversation about race has heightened post George Floyd's murder is when we talk about racial reckoning. And I got to make sure I know the definition of reckoning, because reckoning feels like you're fighting and resolving something, not just acknowledging that it exists. And so I think we have to start talking about how do we move from acknowledgement to actually repairing the harm. And to me, repairing the harm is about not just removing barriers, but also how do you give people let's remove the barriers and give them a leg up. Mm-hmm. right? Like, so we got to do both parts to it. Because I think when we just say remove the barriers, it's like, well, we just need a shot in this unfair system. No, we got to actually create a little bit of fairness in the system so that people can have a shot. And so that just is really an issue that I am thinking deeply about. And then I would just say that that's the kind of conversations I would love for us to have as a foundation with community members, particularly in our vibrant and equitable communities portfolio. So we made a commitment in 2019 to make equity and climate the two issues that we're going to focus on as an institution. And my commitment, I guess, to North Minneapolis is to know that what we're trying to do is not make them two distinctive issues. Like, they're intertwined. Like, we have to have equitable climate solutions, right? And the equitable approaches that we're trying to bring to community has to help community understand what's coming in the future, which I think, Warren, you talked about so beautifully. Like, we need to own, well, there's going to be $23 trillion spent on clean energy. And all we're talking about is how do we find just jobs? Like, I want humanizing jobs for people of color, but I prefer prosperous businesses for them, right? Like, that's my preference. We can have both, but we don't have to. So I think for us, it's like, we want to be, I guess our promise is like, of course, we're going to continue to invest in North Minneapolis. I don't want to come and say some false numbers or whatever. We're going to invest deeply. I guess what our promise would be is that we promise to engage with you on bold and innovative ideas. We promise to listen, to think about, are there ways that we can repair the harm that actually allows us to create new sets of solutions? And I would say, and we promise to respond to you if you contact us. So if you, our vibrant and equitable communities is focused across the state. And this is the place where we're kind of trying to do wealth building work. This is the place where we're trying to strengthen home ownership and create more affordable housing. It's also the place where we want to help people build power. Not only political participation, but how do you build power to actually begin to push and create policies and systems that create the enabling environment for everyone's success in our city and in our region.
Great.
I really agree, and we're working, I think, at Bush to try and have that reparative spirit, that restorative spirit that you've talked about in the work that we do, and I can pledge that we want to be open, we want to be available, we want to hear the ideas that people have, and we are committed to taking more risk. We are committed to making bigger bets on other people's ideas and being willing to get behind community momentum, community-owned solutions in a big way. And we're ready to have that conversation. I think the kinds of work that we've been talking about today, 100% aligned with the overall purpose of the Bush Foundation, 100% aligned with the strategy of the Bush Foundation, 100% aligned with the commitments we've made around closing racial wealth gaps, and the success of our work and the success of the work of the community organizations that many of you represent or work for is absolutely entwined in the same way that our success as the human beings who live together in this community is entwined. And we have a hotline. We are open and ready anytime to talk about your idea, talk about your vision, and see if we can help.
I want to thank each and every one of our guests. This has been a dynamic panel. Audience, if you could, please give them a round of applause.
How fun to be able to do this.
President McClain, how can the audience continue this conversation and get involved further?
First, I would like to thank our series sponsors, their support as commitment to build equity, business development, and economic justice in North Minneapolis. 2020 showed us the importance of investing in small businesses and the organizations that support them. NEON's Grow and Thrive Northside campaign is a catalyst for building a stronger North Side, and creating equitable access to economic mobility, wealth, and opportunities. Support the campaign will position NEON to be better support small businesses in the future. We look forward to sharing more and inviting you to get involved in the coming months. So members can learn about NEON and the Grow and Thrive campaign. You can go to our website, NEON, at neon-mm.org, and you can look that up. Also, you can actually call my office, and you can call us at 612-302-1505, and we will take your calls and get back to you. So, but we welcome your involvement.
Thank you so much, and thank you, NEON, for hosting this dynamic event. I want to invite the audience